An ID, a quiet man, and a secret that the government tried to bury for 50 years, until today. Some stories don't start with gunshots or shouting. Sometimes they begin with a slow turn signal, the kind that clicks steady as a heartbeat, and a car rolling to a stop in the middle of a dusty two-lane road outside Albany, Georgia. That's where Clarence Rollins was that Wednesday afternoon. 72 years old, blue plaid shirt, sleeves rolled up, brown cap resting snug over his gray-lined hair. He drove an old but spotless '84 Cutlass Supreme, the kind you don't see much anymore. Chrome shining, rims clean, vinyl interior that still looked new. His wife used to call it his other baby. She passed 5 years ago. He still visited her every week, just like he did today. Clarence wasn't in a rush. He never was. He drove the same road home, past the same peanut fields and rusted-out barns, windows down just enough to catch the spring breeze. The jazz station out of Macon crackled through the radio. That car didn't have Bluetooth, didn't need it. But then, flashing lights in the rear view, blue and bright, cutting across the cracked pavement. Clarence slowed to a stop right there in the center of the road, nowhere to pull over. Cars behind him began to tap the brakes. A pickup truck swerved slightly into the grass. A woman in a red SUV frowned, already annoyed. Clarence sighed, reached across the glove compartment, grabbed his license, registration, and that other ID, the one most people didn't recognize right away. "Afternoon, sir." The voice was tight, professional, young. Clarence turned to see a slim officer, early 30s, fresh uniform, mirrored shades. His name tag read Mercer. He looked like someone who still checked the mirror before walking into a gas station. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Clarence didn't flinch. "No, sir, but I expect you'll tell me." Mercer squinted, slightly taken aback. "You were drifting across the center line. Had to make sure you weren't impaired or in distress." "I'm fine, just driving. Long day." Clarence handed him the paperwork. Mercer glanced at it, then paused. That last card, black and gold, laminated, edges worn, he held it a second longer. No expression. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back to his cruiser. Clarence watched him go, then looked ahead. A school bus had stopped behind the red SUV now. Kids were leaning out their windows. The driver looked irritated. The road was blocked, but no one moved. A pickup truck honked, short and sharp. Clarence adjusted his cap, then rested both hands on the wheel. He'd been here before. Not this road, not this town, but this feeling. Being watched, questioned, misunderstood. At his age, it didn't rattle him the way it used to, but it still sat heavy in the chest. In the distance, he could see Mercer inside the cruiser, staring at his screen. Not typing, not moving, just staring. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Clarence could see the officer tilt his head slightly, frown, then pick up his radio. "Dispatch." Mercer's voice crackled through his unit radio, audible from Clarence's car. "I need the captain out here. Now. I'm at County Road 112, just west of that gas station near the grain silo." A beat of silence. "What's going on, Officer Mercer?" a voice replied. Mercer's voice lowered, but Clarence still caught it. "I think we've got something big." Clarence didn't move. His eyes just followed the clouds drifting across the sky. Somewhere behind him, a teenage boy was filming with his phone. But before anyone could ask questions, Mercer stepped out of his cruiser, with a different look on his face, not suspicion, not attitude, something else, something that didn't match the confident way he approached earlier. Mercer stepped slowly toward the Oldsmobile again, but this time, his hand wasn't on his belt. His shoulders weren't squared. Something in his pace said he was second-guessing everything. Clarence noticed. He'd seen that walk before, from bosses who realized they were wrong, from men trying to figure out how to say something they didn't understand yet. He kept his hands on the wheel. Mercer stopped just beside the driver's side window. "Mr. Rollins?" he started, but his voice cracked a little. He cleared his throat. "Do you mind stepping out of the vehicle, sir?" Clarence turned his head, calm as ever. "Am I being arrested?" "No, sir, nothing like that. I just..." Mercer glanced back at the cruiser, then to the row of cars stretching behind them. "I need to confirm something, that's all." Clarence didn't move. "You said I was swerving. You've got my license, registration, and military ID. I've said nothing rude. I've cooperated. So let me ask again, am I being detained?" Mercer's jaw tensed, but not in anger, more like confusion. Not at this moment, sir. No. Then I'll stay right here. Clarence looked forward again, back straight, both hands still resting where Mercer could see them. You called your captain? Mercer hesitated. Yes, sir, I did. Why? That one word hung there, caught in the air like heat on pavement. Because, Mercer said finally, that ID you handed me. I ran it. And I don't know what kind of clearance you had or what you did for this country, but I'm not supposed to be the one handling this. Clarence said nothing. Mercer shifted his weight. It came back flagged, high-level flag, red text. It kicked me out of the system. Then a number popped up. No badge, no agency name. Just a phone number. I didn't call it. Clarence finally looked back at him. Good. More horns now. Someone was yelling from their car. What's taking so long? Another voice shouted, Let the man go! A young woman walked closer, filming with her phone, narrating softly. Looks like they got some old man pulled over in the middle of 112. Folks say he ain't done nothing. Officer looking nervous as hell now. Mercer glanced around. The whole road had turned into a slow-moving stage. Eyes on him, on Clarence, on this moment. The radio on Mercer's shoulder crackled again. Captain Blevins en route. ETA 3 minutes. Clarence looked up toward the sky. The clouds were moving fast now. You don't need to be scared of me, son, he said, voice steady. You just need to know how to treat people. Mercer swallowed hard. His hands fidgeted near his duty belt, but he didn't touch his weapon. He stepped back, giving Clarence space, unsure what to say. Behind them, more car doors opened. A few folks started walking toward the scene. Not angry, just curious, but tension buzzed quietly beneath their footsteps. A school bus driver opened her door and climbed out. She walked halfway up the road, arms crossed, watching. She looked like somebody's grandma and didn't blink once. Clarence stayed still. Mercer paced toward the shoulder of the road, pretending to look at his cruiser. His thoughts were spinning now, and it showed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. You pull someone over. You issue a warning or a ticket. Maybe they're upset. Maybe they're calm. But you don't get red text flags and ghost phone numbers and stares from a man who doesn't blink once. 2 minutes later, a dark gray SUV came roaring over the hill, lights mounted behind the windshield. It slowed down, tires crunching over the road shoulder, then stopped beside Mercer's cruiser. Captain Blevins stepped out. Mid-50s, wide-shouldered, no nonsense. Bald with a tight goatee and a permanent squint, like the sun was always in his eyes. He looked at Mercer first, then at Clarence, then back to the crowd that had started to gather, like it was the last act of a play no one had rehearsed. He walked straight to Mercer. What is this? Mercer leaned close and whispered. Clarence watched. He could tell from their body language. The captain didn't like what he was hearing. His eyes snapped toward Clarence more than once. Then he turned and approached the driver's window. Mr. Rollins? His voice was calmer, smoother, measured. Clarence gave him a polite nod. I'm Captain Blevins. I understand you were pulled over a short while ago. Clarence looked around at the frozen road, the stopped bus, the cell phones recording, the red SUV honking in frustration. Yes, Captain. I was. Blevins exhaled slowly. Would you be willing to step out of the vehicle, sir? No cuffs, no charges. I just want to speak with you properly. Clarence held his gaze for a beat. I'll step out, he said, but I won't be disrespected. Blevins nodded once. That's fair? But as Clarence opened his door and stood up, tall, steady, proud, the wind shifted just slightly, and so did the energy in the air, because nobody watching had any idea who this man really was. But they were about to find out. Clarence stepped out of the car slowly, not because he was old, but because he was deliberate. Every motion said, I've done this before. He adjusted his hat, smoothed the front of his blue plaid shirt, and took a few steps toward Captain Blevins. The captain offered a respectful nod, stepping aside to walk with him to the grassy shoulder of the road. The murmurs from the gathering crowd grew louder. Mind if we talk over here? Blevins asked, motioning toward a quieter spot. Clarence glanced at the onlookers, then back at Blevins. I don't mind. I've never had much use for hiding anyway. Mercer stood a few feet away, awkward now, arms crossed, eyes on his boots. Clarence and Blevins stood side by side, both looking out toward the cotton fields beyond the ditch. Blevins cleared his throat. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Rollins. That ID you handed my officer set off more alarms than I've ever seen in my 23 years of wearing a badge. Homeland Security called us directly. They told us to stand down and wait for their confirmation. They didn't explain why, just said your name carries a different kind of weight. Clarence didn't flinch. So I'm asking, Blevins continued, what exactly were you involved in? Clarence smiled, just a little. That's a long story, Captain. You sure you want the real answer? Blevins blinked. I think you owe it to us. This town. My officer. Clarence looked up at the sky again, then down the road. He could feel the heat of the day pressing against his back. He could feel his past catching up to his present. All right then, he said. You ever heard of the Gemini Project? Blevins shook his head. Didn't think so. Wasn't supposed to. Clarence sat down on the edge of the ditch, slow and steady. Not because he was tired, but because this was a story that needed sitting. Mercer took a hesitant step forward. Sir, is that government? Clarence looked at him with the patience of someone who's seen a lot of young men get ahead of themselves. You ever wonder why certain names don't show up in history books? Mercer frowned. I guess. You ever heard of Sergeant Benjamin Ruckers, Lena Foster, James Umi? Mercer looked blank. Blevins, too. Clarence nodded. Exactly. And yet, if it wasn't for them, half the satellites up in space wouldn't be there. Communications would still be stuck in the Cold War, and a lot of folks who look like me would still be working in the back rooms, not front offices. There was a long pause. So you're saying you were part of something secret? Mercer asked, stepping closer. Clarence looked him square in the eye. No, son, I'm saying I helped build it. Behind them, the bus driver crossed her arms tighter. A man in a denim vest whispered to his wife, What's he talking about? Another teen held their phone higher, recording every word. Clarence continued, I was recruited out of Tuskegee in '69. Quiet offer, no fanfare. They needed engineers, black ones the press wouldn't follow, ones who could work in shadows. We built guidance systems, communications filters, encryption modules, some of the first of their kind. We didn't ask questions. We didn't talk to the press. And we didn't put our names on plaques. Blevins stepped back, eyebrows raised. So why are you still flagged today? Why would Homeland be watching a retired man in a cutlass on County Road 112? Clarence gave a half smile. Because they lost track of most of us. Then when a few of us started dying, they started watching again, just in case someone decided to talk. Mercer rubbed the back of his neck, eyes wide. You think they'd really try to shut you down? After all this time? Clarence looked him over slowly. Son, I was invisible for half a century. They'd like to keep it that way. There was silence again. This time it felt heavier. A little girl stepped out from the school bus behind them. Her teacher tried to wave her back, but she didn't listen. She walked up and stared at Clarence like he was someone off TV. Are you famous? She asked, her voice soft but clear. Clarence chuckled. No, baby. Just forgotten. Blevins finally exhaled and turned to Mercer. Cut him loose, now. Mercer nodded and walked toward the Oldsmobile, looking more like a rookie than ever. Clarence stood again, dusted off his pants, and started walking back to his car. People in the crowd didn't cheer, they didn't clap, they just watched, quiet, processing. But the truth hung there, heavier than any arrest could have been. Clarence wasn't just an old man in a nice car. He was a part of history someone tried to bury. And now the ground was shifting. Mercer returned Clarence's documents with both hands this time. Sir, I didn't know. Clarence looked at him, not with anger, but with something heavier, disappointment wrapped in grace. You didn't ask. The words weren't loud, but they cut deep. Mercer swallowed and stepped back. Clarence sat behind the wheel again, but didn't start the engine. The moment had turned quiet again, the way things sometimes do when truth hits hard and there's nothing left to say. But someone did have something to say. The woman from the red SUV, the one who'd been filming, stepped forward, still holding her phone. She looked to be in her 30s, dressed like she came straight from a grocery run. Leggings, sweatshirt, keys on a carabiner looped around her finger. Sir, Mr. Rollins, can I ask you something? Clarence looked up at her through the open window. Go ahead. Why didn't you ever tell people? Why didn't you go on TV, write a book, You were part of something major, right? Clarence shook his head slowly. You ever try to tell a story people don't want to hear? She didn't answer. Back then, people didn't want to believe that folks like me had minds sharp enough to build satellites or encrypt codes. They wanted us in factories, maybe in the army, but not behind machines that talk to space, not drawing up blueprints that even generals couldn't read. Blevins and Mercer were still listening. So were the people behind them. Even the little girl from the bus had come back, arms folded, listening like she'd never heard anything more important. Clarence continued. I watched younger men than me get awards for ideas I pitched in windowless rooms. I saw my patents get buried, watched my family struggle while men in suits flew to conferences off our labor. I was told to be proud just to be allowed in the room. He leaned forward on the wheel. So I stayed quiet. I came home. I built engines in my shed, helped my neighbors fix their cars. I married the best woman I ever met, and every week I bring her flowers. I didn't need a statue. I just wanted peace. No one spoke. You could hear the breeze sliding through the tall grass now. A hawk circled overhead, casting a thin shadow on the pavement. Clarence looked at Mercer again. And you pulled me over because you saw an old black man in an old car driving slow. Mercer opened his mouth, but Clarence stopped him with a raised hand. I don't need the apology. Just remember this the next time you grab that wheel and flip on your lights. You don't always know who you're stopping. You don't know what battles they've already survived. Mercer nodded. His cheeks were flushed, and for once, he didn't try to talk over the moment. Blevins spoke up finally, voice quieter than before. Mr. Rollins, I don't have the words to thank you properly. What you did, what you gave up, that's not lost on me. Clarence gave a half smile. Then don't let it be lost on the next one. Blevins nodded. The woman who'd been filming lowered her phone. Would it be okay if I shared this? Not to embarrass you. I just think people need to know. You shouldn't be erased. Clarence looked at her for a long moment. It's not about me. If you share it, tell them there were others. Tell them I wasn't the smartest in the room, just the one who lived long enough to still be talking. She nodded. I will. Clarence turned the key. The Oldsmobile came to life with a soft rumble, smooth like the day it rolled off the lot. He checked his mirrors, then looked at Mercer one last time. Take care of your badge. It's heavier than you think. Mercer just nodded. Clarence pulled forward slowly. The crowd parted for him. No honking now, no shouting. Just people watching, some with respect, some with guilt, and a few with awe they didn't know how to name. As he drove off, someone from the bus clapped, one clap, then another, a few more followed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't coordinated, but it was enough to say, we see you now. But Clarence didn't look back. He'd spent enough years in the shadows. The road ahead was quiet, and for once, it felt like it finally belonged to him. Clarence didn't say a word the rest of the drive home. The road was the same one he'd taken 100 times, but somehow, today it felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because people had finally seen him, and that meant something. He parked in his gravel driveway the same way he always did, tires lined up just right. Birds chirped in the tree out front. A neighbor across the street raised a hand, unsure whether to wave or stay quiet. Clarence gave a small nod. That was enough. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil and old pine floorboards. The jazz station still played from the radio in the kitchen. He sat at the table with a glass of water and stared out the window for a while, letting the silence settle. No cameras, no questions, no more explaining. Just peace. But out there, things were moving. That video from the red SUV woman? It spread fast. Within hours, it had been reposted on social media, stitched with headlines like, "They tried to stop him, then found out who he really was," or "The man history forgot." People started digging. Quiet mentions of Project Gemini appeared on obscure message boards. A few former engineers posted cryptic comments. Finally, someone said it, followed by silence. The clip of Clarence saying, "You don't always know who you're stopping," racked up over 1 million views by morning. Some were outraged. Some were inspired. A few still doubted, but most just listened. In town, something shifted. The local high school's history teacher, Mr. Rowe, printed out the transcript and shared it with his students. One girl who'd been on that very bus brought it home to her parents. Her father, a contractor, drove past Clarence's house a few days later and left a brand new welcome mat at the door. No note, just a gesture. Officer Mercer? He didn't get fired, but he got quiet. He stopped showing off at the diner, started listening more during traffic stops, began attending the community council meetings, sat in the back, didn't talk, just listened. And when he saw Clarence again a month later, outside the post office, he tipped his head and said, "Still learning, sir." Clarence nodded. "Keep going." Some people think stories like this are made up, that they only happen in movies or books. But sometimes, truth doesn't need embellishment. Sometimes, it just needs patience. A man spends decades building a country that never said thank you. He's overlooked, pulled over, assumed guilty. But instead of yelling, instead of breaking down, he stands tall and tells the truth. And in doing so, he teaches a town, a cop, and maybe even a country something it forgot. Every person you see has a history. Every face holds a story you haven't heard. And every time you judge too fast, you risk missing something extraordinary. We all say we want to learn, but learning starts with listening. Listening to people like Clarence. Listening before assuming. Listening before reacting. So the next time you feel quick to judge, the next time you're behind the wheel, behind a badge, or behind a keyboard, remember, the quietest man in the room might be the one who built the room. If this story moved you, share it. Not for views, not for likes, but because maybe someone out there is still being ignored, still being erased, still waiting to be seen. Let Clarence's story be a reminder that silence doesn't mean insignificance, and dignity doesn't need permission.